My name's Bob, and this is the Higher Way podcast. All things eclectic, lots of martial artists, lots of NLP, lots of meditation, lots of other nonsense. And today, my guest, all the way from sunny South Wales, down in the valleys, is Justin Reeks, or should I call him Grandmaster Justin Reeks, based on the conversation we just had. Hiya, Justin, how you doing, mate?
Good afternoon, Bob. How's it going?
I'm good. Yeah. Well, I should be able to call you a grandmaster because you've been doing it for you've been doing Muay Thai now. You 35 years, something like that.
35 years, yeah, 35 years.
So you must be getting on a bit.
You wouldn't believe the times I've been 21.
So
officially as old as it. I'm 50.
You're 50.
Yeah, I was 50 this year.
50 this year, and I missed his birthday. Well, I didn't actually. I knew it was his birthday, but I didn't want to mention it to him. Okay, so there's only a couple of years between us then.
Well, exactly.
I wish. So, all right then. Of course, a lot of people know that know me will know you because we've been friends a long time, and your camp was the first camp outside of Birmingham, Phraya Pichai. The question is, obviously, what got you into doing the martial arts? When did it start?
35 years ago, I started doing karate. A friend of mine was a couple of years older than me, was away in Union training, and when he come back, he wanted to carry on while he was on his holidays. So I started doing karate. I think pretty much everybody used karate as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
While I was doing the karate, and because years ago, sort of karate instructors, jiu-jitsu instructors, judo, nobody cross-trained. No one liked it. But I was lucky I met John Wilkes when I was doing the karate. And he was a big believer, the same as yourself, learn as much as you can. What works for me is not going to work for you and might not work for somebody else. But what works for you, take it, use it, move on and apply it with other things. So I was very fortunate I met him. So of course, when I was doing the karate, I'm looking over, I'm watching these Thai boxers training. And I'm looking at what I'm doing, and then I look at the sort of Thai boxing compared to the semi-contact style I was doing. I'm like, this is absolute rubbish compared to that. There's no way that any of these boys gonna survive the warm-up in there, let alone a sparring session. And it was just a natural progression. So I started. A friend of mine got me into it because he wanted me to find a club for him to train at when he was home. So that's how I started.
How old were you then?
I was 15.
Okay.
15th of June, 35 years ago.
Bloody hell. Yeah, it flies past, doesn't it? So like a lot of people, like you say, you start off in karate, traditional Japanese martial arts. It was the same for me. At that time, that's all there was. That and boxing. So you saw John Wilkes. So you mentioned a name there because it was through John that I met you. Because John, go on, you tell the story.
Well, like I said, John was he was a very unusual instructor because, like I said, when I was doing the jiu-jitsu, I had to keep it secret that I was doing other martial arts because my jiu-jitsu instructor didn't want his students doing any other martial art. And the same with the karate. The karate guys didn't like you going to train with other clubs, and that's just the way it was. But John had a different mindset. He said, and as you've reiterated over the decades, anyone who says any one martial art is the best is talking out the top of their head. Get out there. I became a bit of a sort of martial art gypsy as such, a sort of nomad. I've trained high grades in most martial arts just to see what works. That works for me. That doesn't work. If I use that with that works. And that was the way it was. So obviously John was looking to transfer from his sort of karate and kickboxing that he was doing to the Thai boxing. And we would travel up and down the country at different seminars. But we would always come up, this one name would always come up. And obviously it was your name. So towards the end of 85, the start of 86, I think we came up and done a seminar at the university.
That's right, yeah.
And then the next seminar, I think you had at the studio, we came up to that one, and we were up there sort of once a month. And John said, look, because we'd been around different other camps as well, and the standard wasn't there that we wanted. You know, if we were going to completely change what we were doing, the sort of karate, kickboxing, Thai boxing hybrid that we had, you know, we knew we weren't good enough. You know, what we were trying to learn off the internet at the time and from going to different seminars, which is something I learned very early on. You know, just because a Thai is a good Thai boxer doesn't make him a good teacher.
Oh yeah, that's common, isn't it?
So many seminars, and the Thais have been teaching. I'm like, what a waste of a 4-hour journey this was. And then some mediocre Thai boxers make tremendous, tremendous instructors, tremendous seminars.
So what you're saying is, I was one of those mediocre instructors.
Well, no, it was the opposite, because obviously.
I'm joking, Justin. I'm joking.
The seminar, the one in the, I think it was just me and John came to that one. We come to the one in the university, and in the journey all the way back, we're like, yeah, we found the camp. This is the one. So then we came to the next one to make sure it wasn't a fluke, you know, because. Oh
well, yeah.
And it wasn't, and we learned so much. I think in about a 6-week period, we learned more than we'd learned previous, you know, and we learned so much. And then I think it was John that sort of approached you and said, look, we want to be a Phraya Pichai. We want to be affiliated to your camp. I think we were the 3rd club in Phraya Pichai, but the first one outside Birmingham, because you had 2.
There was Preston with John, obviously, John Barker, as he was known then. And there was me in Birmingham, and that was it. So there literally was only 2 camps, Phraya Pichai camps. And neither me nor John had any interest in franchising them or anything like that. In fact, John stopped and moved to America, as we know. And that's an interview I'd love to do as well at some point, if I can get hold of him. So really, once John had moved away from Preston and off to the States and so on, there was only Birmingham. And I remember John saying, because I never planned to have different clubs anywhere. I just enjoyed teaching, as you know, in Birmingham. And it was John Wilkes who really created this whole phenomenon. It's his fault that I've ended up doing this for a living, sort of thing. Okay. And I remember how flexible he was, and it was obviously he had a karate background, but it was obvious that he was able to pick stuff up. And you two were always coming up to seminars. And I think, yeah. And I remember I was quite shocked when he said, oh, can you come down and do a seminar for us? And I was like, oh, yeah, all right. So you guys were actually my first external seminar that I ever did. So, you know, John and yourself are partly responsible for me developing as a teacher as well. Do you know what I mean? So being a teacher is 2 ways, isn't it? It's a 2-way thing.
I mean, in his day, John was very unique. He was not a traditional, you know, even though he was doing traditional martial arts, he wasn't a traditionalist. He recognized the flaws in the styles we did. Like I said, I mean, I got 3 black belts, and I'm qualified to say the style of karate I did, I would say 90% of it is a pile of rubbish. You know, it's very traditional. The sport side of it is semi-contact. The self-protection side of it is designed for punching through bamboo armor. I mean, there are certain places in Wales that still have people walking around with bamboo armor, but not many.
And tinfoil helmets.
Especially them. But it just wasn't realistic, you know. It was an art form, whereas Thai boxing is a fighting art. You know, there's the difference. You know, constantly being used, constantly developing. I mean, as I said, you know, I've been training with yourself 35 years, and I'm still learning. You know, it's constantly tweaking, it's constantly being developed. I mean, we've had 3 stance changes in the last 3 decades, and that is that's your foundation. That's a massive change.
Yeah.
Because someone comes along, they can kick a bit better. So defense has got to improve. The clinch improves, so the defense against that improves, and it's constantly flowing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you have to constantly adjust, don't you? Anyway, that's the beauty of Muay Thai, isn't it? That's how it's evolved. That's why.
And it's still evolving.
One of the most superior contact systems there is. But again, it's still competition. That's the other thing. That's, you know, it's still a competition
driven, which drives it to excel.
Yeah.
John recognized that, you know, almost 4 decades ago now. He recognized that traditional martial arts were flawed, you know, we had black belts in karate who couldn't kick above the waist and couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, you know, and then so John is like, well, this is not, you know, this, I can't teach this as I call it self-protection when it's not effective.
Yeah,
it is what it is. It's an art form, you know, with the kata side of it, the sport side of it was, you know, score a point.
And John's no longer in the sport now, is he?
No, he's still around. He's still training. Actually, he does a lot of weights, but many years in the front row and training in martial arts for 4 or 5 decades, and having a love for Stella has taken its toll.
And Stella, by the way, is not a woman; it's an alcoholic drink. So he's your typical Valleys boy, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
But I remember, very bright guy, asked really good questions. You know what I mean?
That's it. His foundation.
He was really your teacher. You know, he's the guy who inspired you, didn't he?
Yeah, right from the get-go. And he would say, he said, you know, whereas these other martial arts, my jiu-jitsu instructor, it was like, oh, but, you know, when he found out I was training, they were going to throw me out of the club. They're going to throw me out of the gym. It was absolutely ridiculous. And it was the same, you know, you go somewhere to train, and as soon as they found out you did other things, oh, you can't train with us anymore because you're doing this.
It's madness, isn't it?
Ridiculous. You know, it's foolish.
So,
traditional martial arts are so narrow-minded. I'm not saying every one of them are. I mean, there's some styles of karate that are absolutely tremendous, but they're realistic styles. They're not stuck in tradition.
Well, I know the karate back in my day was, most of the guys teaching it were hard men, and I think even if you're giving them a fluffy toy, they'd kill you with it. You know what I mean? Because it's the intention behind the training, isn't it? It's always that mindset behind the training. That's the important factor.
Yeah,
we keep coming back to
hard man. They hard men. They had the skills to go with it.
Yeah. So you got attracted to Thai boxing because it was realistic. You met an instructor who had the right sort of attitude that fitted in with your views, if you like.
Yeah.
You came up and trained with us, obviously, and formed the Phraya Pichai Camp in Cwmbran, which you now run, and you're now the chief instructor for the whole of the Welsh clubs.
Yeah.
You've fought a lot as well. That's got to be made clear. I mean, you've had your fair number of fights over the years.
Yeah, I had
and so on.
I don't count the amateur fights. Obviously, interclubs weren't around when we started.
No, they didn't exist.
I had 22 pro fights, 4 losses, 2 draws. I fought 9 times for Wales and twice for Britain.
Yeah.
I fought in Thailand as well. That was a great.
And you fought in Thailand, of course, yeah, because you spent some time out there. What do you think of the? I mean, I know what you're going to say, but for the people who are listening and watching this, there's a big difference, isn't there, between training in Thailand and training in the UK?
Absolutely, massive difference. They got the luxury of 6 hours a day to train, so the intensity isn't there for the lessons, but it's so relaxed. It's repetition. I mean, the good fighters, they know all the techniques, but they'll drill half a dozen of their best techniques, and that's all they'll use in a fight. They keep it so simple. I mean, when I was out there, I mean, because I spent a month in Thailand, the gyms we trained, because I fought in the World Championships out there. So the gyms we trained in Bangkok were sort of, they kicked the Thais out and they turned it over to the Westerners. So you were really just training with yourself.
Yeah.
But I went down to Pattaya for a week and I trained in a camp, Sichuan, just outside Pattaya.
Yeah.
And that was life-changing. It was, they didn't teach me anything technique-wise, but I restructured the way I trained about 80% when I come back.
Right.
And I was amazed at their knowledge of sports science. Not that they knew it as sports science, it was just the right way to do it, or the most effective way to train to get the results they wanted. And it's now, decades later, the sports science is backing up the way they've been doing it.
Yeah.
The sports science is following what they've been doing. They're training not because the science is telling them to do it that way. They're doing it that way because it's the best way.
It works. It works.
The science has come along behind it and said, yeah, that's it's because of this, and it backs it up. And
which is why the Thais were always difficult to fight anyway. So the World Championships, what year was that? I can't remember now. There's been...
I think that one was, 97, late 90s, 97, 98.
Yeah, 97, 98 sounds familiar, because I was out at the World Championships in 96 in Utrecht, but they were the first amateur World Championships. But you were fighting professional, weren't you? So, obviously. Were there fights in Bangkok then? Your fights?
In Bangkok. They weren't in Lumpino, and they were in the Ramo one, a massive stadium that was, I think, was built purposely for this.
Yeah.
Huge stadium, but I mean, my third fight in Thailand, fighting A class in front of 10,000 people.
Well, this is the other thing as well, you see, because there's a big thing about the A class, the B and the C class, because of course in Thailand, just so people know this, there's no such thing as B and C class fights, different classes of fights. There's just 5 3-minute rounds of fighting, isn't there?
I think, you know, I think we feel the same way about it. There should be no C and B classes. It should all be A class. You know, the amount of times, you know, obviously when I ref fights as well, and you're given the different rules and the regulations for this type of fight, but it should all be like, get in. If you're going to fight A class.
You know, if you go anywhere in the world, there's one set of rules for football. You know what I mean? It's dead easy.
Exactly.
Just follow those rules. You know, and cricket, you know, you've got a couple of different styles of cricket, but basically the rules are the same. And it's funny that Muay Thai should have so many different sets of rules. Whenever you go anywhere, to any group in the UK and Europe, the rules are all adjusted and changed and shifted. And you think, well, I mean, I used to say this to the committee when I was on the British Thai Boxing Council. Why are we doing this? You know, and there were a few voices who were saying the same thing, you know, but you go with the groundswell of opinion, you know, the majority. It was democratic, you know. But I think the sport lost a lot because of that.
Yeah, I mean, 22 pro fights. I had 8 A-class fights, and it's a completely different fight. When you stick those elbows and knees to the head, it's a completely different fight to a C-class, B-class. You know, people, it's more like physical chess then. It's move and counter move, kind of. People don't just run in and bang, because you're just going to walk straight onto an elbow, and that's going to, you know, if it skims, it cuts, it impacts, it breaks. You know, it's a completely different fight. Oh.
It changes clinch work completely.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you can't play your fancy clinch work when there's elbows flying around. And this is what we are constantly teaching, isn't it? So just to make it clear to people listening, you need to go on the internet and have a look, but there's a variety of rules now that have been imposed on Muay Thai since its use in the West. And you have A, B, and C class. C is fighting without elbows and knees to the head. B class is fighting without elbows, but with knees to the head. And A class is elbows and knees to the head. That's just a rough, isn't that? I'm right on it, Justin. That's a rough.
C class, 3 2-minute rounds, no knees, no elbows.
That's it. And of course, those rounds can change. Sometimes it's 5-2s. You can turn up to a show and they go, no, it's C class, but it's fine. And of course, now you've got N class, which is even funnier because that's wearing shin pads and heavy gloves. So that's basically like doing an interclub where you win. And you just think, how many more divisions of Muay Thai are we going to have? Are you going to have the ones for where you can't use kicks to the legs? You know what I mean? I mean, it's getting ridiculous.
Well, I fought in France once, and we're at the rules meeting, and they said, "Oh, this is European Thai rules." I'm like,
"That's a new one.
I've never heard of that. What's that then?" But they were trying to make it more like K1. They were trying to take the clinch out of it, which is ridiculous. You know,
well, I mean, Thai without clinch is not Thai. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but you know. So obviously, you've got all this experience of fighting, and the camp was really successful. The Phraya Pichai Camp in Cwmbran specifically was very successful.
20 years ago, we had probably a dozen fighters. We had 4 champions in the one gym.
That's what I mean. You had 4 champions in one gym.
Yeah, we had 2.
I mean, that's pretty good. And this is back in the day when, you know, the standards were a little bit, shall I say, a little bit higher? I don't know whether I can say that. It was a different atmosphere anyway, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there are some good fighters out there now, but the standard and the fights have definitely been diluted. compared
There's
to
more fights now than you can ever imagine. There's so many British champions. I mean, I've lost track. I'll meet people and they'll say, "Oh, have you heard of it? He's a British champion in Thai box." And I go, "Now, back in our day, when you heard the name of a British champion, you knew who it was because it was only him, because he was the British champion. Or there might be two at the same weight because there was two organisations, I think, at the time, the British Thai Boxing Council and the there was one down south as well. I can't remember the name of it. That's old age for you. But essentially, you sort of knew these people.
Yeah.
And you knew what you were coming against. It's like, it was quite common that you would fight Yogi Pahendra because he was in another organization. So you would, obviously, you and Yogi used to have it was almost like you were dating, you know. It's like, but you did have a couple of fights together, really good fights as well.
Yeah, well, the last time I may or may not have taken his British title off him.
We'll never know.
Thank you very much.
You know, and that's the other thing, isn't it? The quality of judging is all over the place still.
It's
I mean, you know.
Well, I blame the promoters for that as well, because I mean, some promoters will literally grab people out of a crowd. I mean, some fights I've reffed, all that's missing is a 4-pack in the middle of the ring for them to fight over. It is literally fun fights. I was reffing a fight down in Cardiff, and it was top of the bill. It was a Welsh title, and that was the one thing I never got. I always wanted the Welsh title, but the Welsh champ was a boy from North Wales when I was fighting. He wouldn't fight me. Mm-hmm. Then when I started getting really successful, he asked me to match him on a show, and I wouldn't. I said, basically, I'm not stepping back down to that level. You know, I'm above and beyond that. You know, so these guys were my weight, and they were fighting for a Welsh title. So I'm looking forward to this fight. I'm thinking this is going to be fireworks. You know, both fit guys. You can see they've been in the gym. They got their gym muscles. But it was a case of train like Tarzan, fight like Jane.
I like that. Train like Tarzan, fight like Jane. Love that on a t-shirt.
But these guys, I mean, by round 3, as a ref, they're just so tired, and their guard is down. I'm having to engage box. I've had to pull them into the ring and warn them. If you don't start hitting each other, I'm going to disqualify the pair of you.
Yeah.
So after the one guy won, and it was rubbish. It was the worst fight of the night, and it was supposed to be top of the bill. So I said to the promoter afterwards, I said, who are these guys? I was expecting fireworks here. And I said, are they, were they good enough to fight for this title, which was vacant? And as it turned out, it was a title that camp had just created. So these guys would have.
You see it all the time. And this is why you've got kids who are like 7 or 8 year old with titles. You know, you've got a camp full of kids with titles, and you go, well, how can there be that many titles in the UK? And it's just absurd now. You know, it's got to the point where the titles actually don't mean anything. And I think, I know you've got the same opinion as me. If you want to prove yourself, go and fight in Thailand, really.
Absolutely.
You know, because, well, quite frankly, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's a funny old game, isn't it? And it's always down to, values rather than egos, and sadly it's the egos that drive. It's true of most martial arts, and particularly because we don't have a governing body either. There's no governance, there's no legislation that controls what goes on, and it's a shame that never happened. We had an opportunity and it was blown back in the day.
If you remember, the BTBC came as close as anybody, but then, as you said, as you alluded to, egos got in the way. It became very political. If you're in the BTBC, you can't go fight on this show, not because they're rubbish, because they're better than us, they're more successful, we don't like it. And it started getting like that. So I think if you remember, we as a club, Phraya Pichai, pulled out.
Yeah, we went alone, didn't we? So independent.
And they lost, I think it was 75% of their membership.
Yeah, we did have a lot of members. We did have a huge membership portfolio, and I guess we still do, but we sort of stand alone, don't we? We just get on with our own thing. I don't particularly care. Yeah,
to be told, you can't go and fight that person because this person is supposed to be the best in your weight category. You can't fight him because he's not in the PTPC. So
yeah,
well, I want to test myself against this person.
Yeah.
And
It's funny, but even in Thailand, you know, you've got Lumpini and you've got Rajdamnern and you've got Omnoi Stadium and you've got a few. And again, it's promoters, isn't it? It's about money.
Yeah.
I mean, in Thailand, I can understand that because obviously people are trying to eke out a living, and fight for a fighter. It's a job, isn't it? It's not like it's a hobby for us. It's a job because you've got a proper job, of course, haven't you?
Well, they all thought we were idiots. We're out there. They're all bloody Man U fans. They all want to play football.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And they can't understand why a wealthy Englishman is doing this crazy sport, because you're not going to get.
You can do the train in Thai boxing. We do it as a way to get off the streets.
Yeah, to make a living. Yeah, to feed our families. Yeah. So you've got a gym in Cwmbran, which is still going. And you obviously the COVID thing's going to stop things, but you'll be back to training. But you've also, there's another side as well that you've not mentioned yet, which is and it comes back to what you were saying about practicality of the martial arts, right? Because you worked the doors for a long time as well. Is that something you want to talk about?
There's a few stories there. Yeah, I done 15 years. 15 years of that.
Yeah. It's funny, you see, because we had Ian McCrane on doing a podcast just the other day, and I've also just interviewed Graham Leggett from Scotland, and guess what? They all did the doors as well. So there's a sort of a theme here, isn't there? That people who are drawn to practical martial arts tend to have done the doors. Why? What was your reason for doing the doors? Was that to test yourself, or just simple, like to make a living, you know, to make money?
No, to be honest, I had no interest in working the door. I'd proven myself. I was fighting and doing.
Yeah.
I didn't need to sort of test myself certainly against drunken bums in pubs.
Yeah.
I happened to be in a pub one day, and I, same as yourself, I can't stand bullies. And there was this boy in the pub. He had mental health issues, and he was being bullied by a couple of lads. And I just couldn't. People were, muttering about it, but no one was doing anything. So I just walked across, and without throwing a punch, these three guys walked them outside, sent them on their way. And the landlord was like, "Oh my God, these boys are really hard. I'm a bit worried. They're going to come back tomorrow. Any chance you could pop in tomorrow? I'll and just sit in the crowd and keep an eye out for them." And I said, "Well, if I'm going to do it, I'll do it properly." So, and that's how I got going.
Right. Okay.
Days before you needed to be licensed, even though I did get licensed. But that's how it started, because I just couldn't stand watching this poor kid get bullied.
Yeah.
So that was how it started for me, but it was a steep learning curve.
Oh yeah. I mean, how did you, I mean, obviously that'll have kicked off big time at one point for the first time. So how did you feel you handled that? How did that go? If you can remember.
To be perfectly honest, I always worked on. We were there to provide a safe drinking environment. We're not there to beat the punters up.
No.
And 9 times out of 10, I would talk it out. I would probably say in 15 years, I probably had about half a dozen big kickoffs where I've had to step in and unfortunately really hurt people.
Yeah.
But that's to stop them, trying to stab you and trying to knife you and glass you and whatever. So it's, so it was only a handful of times. I mean, if I didn't like the look of it, or I didn't think I could chuck it out in an hour's time, it never came in. The best way to run a pub is to vet the clientele.
Yeah.
A little bit, it doesn't come in.
This is what Graham and Ian said, exactly the same as you. The best doormen don't get into fights; they avoid them. Marcus used to say that. Big Marcus, Marcus? Yeah. He used. I remember him once saying to this guy who said he'd been on the doors 10 years and had 100 fights or something. He said, "Well, you're a crap doorman, aren't you?" He said, "I've been doing the doors 20 years. He said, "I've only had about 5 fights. I've had a few pushy things, quite a few of them, and the rest's been talky. So it's down to communication, isn't it?"
Absolutely, down to communication. And again, it's about taking psychological control of the situation. It's about reading a situation. It almost becomes like a sixth sense.
Yeah.
Even now, I mean, I'm at the doors now for 5 years, and if I'm out with my friends and we're in it, right, and it's quite notorious. If I'm out with people and we've gone out for a meal, even to a restaurant for a meal, they say, "Well, right, you can have this table, sit there." I guess I can't sit there. And even though my young lady says, "Oh, we can't sit there because he can't sit with his back to a door. He can't sit," you know, and you find yourself doing it. You walk into a pub, right? What are the windows like? Are they double glazed? You know, fire safety, where are the fire doors, right? Is it a kitchen? Yeah, if there's a kitchen, I know there's at least a fire door through there.
Yeah.
If I pick that stool up, I can get through that window. You know, so you look at the fire safety side of it first, and then you look at who's in there. And sometimes we've been out in a pub with the boys, and I'd be like, come on, we'll go over to this corner. Oh, we're happy, you know, come on over by you. And then seconds later, bang, it's a big kickoff. How do you know that? Well, I was watching them. You could see the body language. And you do, it's not a sixth sense. It's years of experience, you know, of reading, you know, it's the same as yourself. You're trained in verbal and non-verbal communication. So you read a situation just by people, you know, people don't have to say a word. You can't even hear what they're saying, but you know that that's about to escalate.
People don't have the ability to fall. You say, I think what happens is people go out, they leave their house and they switch off. Like, we're going to have a good time, and their brain switches off, which is, as you know, highly dangerous, because the time you want to be switched on is when you leave your house.
Exactly.
Do you find that, I mean, I know from my experience that, you know, when you switch on, it doesn't, because somebody said to me, well, you've got to be stressed out all night. Actually, it does you up. Go on, tell it. Say what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
You're more relaxed, isn't it? Because you never switch off. You're always on duty. You know, the same as, I guess, if you're military or police, you're always on duty because you've done it for so long. It becomes a way of life. The same as martial arts. It becomes, you know, Thai boxing. 35 years later, it's become a way of life. Yeah. You know, it's and it is, and you go out and you find yourself automatically doing these things. And then it's quite funny, the people around you. Is a good friend of mine, Merv, and he has got, you know, he's built like an outside brick shit house. He is.
Big lad.
But he attracts trouble because people want to challenge themselves against him. And when I'm out with him, he says, you know, because obviously I'm a bit of a short ass as well. I'm only sort of 5'8" in my heels. And he, you know,
I've seen you.
I was the shortest doorman in the area for 15 years.
Yeah. Because I was going to say that you're not the biggest bloke, are you? You know, you sort of wear the same height. In fact, I think you're a little bit smaller than me. Maybe.
not from the waist down, of course.
No, obviously, yeah. There's a lot more going on down there. Hence the name Justin. Which is a joke we've had for years. Yeah. So
we would be in pubs and people would go to stand. He said, "You can't stand there. That's Reggers, my nickname." He said, "That's where Justin will stand. So Reggers will stand." And move out of the way. And I come back from the bar, right, here's your pints, and stand there because I've got line of sight of places I need. Because and my friends would then understand that and pick up on it as well.
So, the door work, obviously the Thai boxing, but you've also got another aspect to what you do. You run an engineering company as well, don't you? You're like the managing director of your own engineering company. How the hell did that happen? Well, this is all going on. You still had time to set up a company. I've been at sort of management level in engineering companies quite often. So if the time came then to take the step to run my own business, to see if I could do it. I've done it for other people. Let's see if I can do it for myself. So you were already doing this anyway? Yeah.
So I was a works manager at a few different places. I always sort of achieved a position of responsibility. It was back. I think I just won the British title, and I'd come off a loss. I'd fought for the world title and come second. To be perfectly honest, I think I came third in that fight. I'd never been hit so fast out in my life. His name was Samir Mohammed. He was an exceptional young talent. I think I was his 81st fight, 81 wins. He was right, exceptional. I gave away. It was a day before weigh-in. Gave away too much weight and paid the price for it. But lesson learned. So I'd come off that loss. Then I won the British title, and the opportunity came up to set an engineering business up. And I was thinking to myself, I'm getting paid for these fights, but it's never ever going to be enough to pay the mortgage. You know, like, you know, what's going to pay the mortgage? Setting up a business for myself or fighting. So we set the business up, and I think I had one more fight after that, and it became, because I was fighting professionally, but still working full time.
Well, this is what a lot of people don't realize. It's not like you weren't doing anything. You had to hold down a job as well as train, which is not in Thailand. All you do is box. That's your job. Yeah. So, sorry, Justin. It's just, I think it's an important point to make to people. People seem to think that, you know, these guys who are British champions and that are just training all the time. But in fact, most of them are holding down jobs. So before you go and open up the office in the morning, you've gone for a run. You know what I mean? Before you open the factory, you've been out for the early morning run.
I mean, you would train twice a day and try and fit it in around your work. And if you work shifts, it was trying to find somebody you could train in the days while all the boys were in work. It was a tough juggling act, and it became a juggling act. And the business took off and started being successful. So unfortunately, then the fighting had to come to an end.
And to be fair, you weren't getting any younger. So,
but no,
I know you don't like that, but the fact is, it is a young man's game, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I was having this conversation the other day because, like I said, I've gone into the sort of the judging and refereeing side of things as well to keep my hand in and keep up to speed. And every other martial art has got a veteran circuit, apart from Thai boxing. If you're good enough, you're good enough. And that's the way it is. But if they had a veteran circuit, I would be on it.
Oh, I know you would be. I mean, I've seen you refereeing. When you're refereeing, it's like you're in the ring. You're in the ring there to do a job, you know? It's like, well, I can't fight in here, but I'm certainly going to control this fight. You know what I mean? And everybody can see by the way you move that you're used to being in a boxing ring, you know? And I guess it's the same for me. You can't stand standing outside a ring.
No.
I mean, I can't. If I'm turning up for a show with fighters, I think, why am I not refereeing? I need to, you know what I mean? And there's many times I've done that in the past where I've refereed, I've been in the corner and I've been judging and doing the emceeing. That was a long time ago, though.
I don't know if you remember, I fought a Dutch boy up in Manchester. And I got tucked up a bit by somebody in the BTBC.
Go on.
I was supposed to be fighting his younger brother. He was two Dutch people over. And it was an international show. And I ended up fighting the boy, gave away 6 kilos on the day. And even Tony Myers come over to me and said, you know, what are you doing, mate? This boy's, you know, he's tight. He's 2 weight categories above you, and he's a double Dutch champion.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I've done the work. I'll fight him. And to be honest, it's probably the best I'd ever fought. And I'm pretty sure you were reffing the show. You were comparing it, and I think the ref hadn't turned up. So you had a ref as well.
Yeah, that's
I want you in my corner. Because unfortunately, at the time, I mean, Johnny Welch was great and Dylan, the pad man and corner man, but they didn't have my experience.
Yeah.
So I was going back to the corner. They were just giving me water and patching me up and sending me back.
You didn't even have a proper cornerman.
Didn't have a proper cornerman, so I was having to assess the fight and deal with my successes and my weaknesses, or while I was sat on the stool sucking air out of my ass.
Yeah. Was Andy Newell? Andy Newell was fighting on that show, I think. Do you remember Andy Newell?
Yeah, I remember Andy Newell.
I think Andy might have been fighting on that show. I seem to remember it. You know, but no cornerman.
So basically, cornering myself. I mean, they were there to tell, but they were great at what they did, but they didn't have the experience that I had. You know, because when I was there, I was cornering and coaching the other fighters, getting them ready, letting them fight, and because I was at a standard, I was usually top of the bill, and then having to get myself ready and jump in the ring and have, I mean, after my British title fight when I fought Yogi, we had to, one of the guys who travelled up to watch us, we had to get his girlfriend to help corner for me because one of the cornermen never turned up. It was bizarre, but you know,
Thai boxing.
It was trying to do it all. But I think you remember that it was up in Manchester, and it was a Dutch guy, and it was like I said, I gave away ridiculously. You know, I wouldn't even let my fighters give away a kilo now because you know, it's ridiculous. 6 kilos on the day, and when I got in the ring to fight him, I'm like, jeez. His younger brother, I was talking to him earlier. The way in. Where's your son?
And, did he beat him?
It was, to be honest, I lost the fight, but it was a split decision. And there's always honesty amongst fighters. And they spoke brilliant English. The Dutch come over afterwards, and the guy's corner, the coach, come over. He said, he said, we run out of ideas. We didn't know what to do. He said, to be honest, we thought we'd lost the fight. He said, we're grateful we got the decision. He said, but my boy is 6 kilos heavier than you. He's 2 weight categories above you, and it's the hardest fight he's ever had.
That's good, isn't it?
And like I said, there's honesty amongst fighters. I fought in Ireland, Great Britain versus Ireland, under Tony Myers' guidance, and I knocked the boy down twice. There was 7 of us, no, 9 of us, nine in the British team, and the best result was mine, a draw, and I knocked the boy down twice to get that. But after the fight, they held our hands up, and he's looking at me. He's like, "Oh, it's ridiculous." He shakes his head. He storms out the ring. He's like, "That's ridiculous." He said.
So you see, what I'd like to get into now is talking to you about sort of training methods, your experience of coaching, corner work, judging, refereeing. Right? Sadly, we've ran out of time. Right? So you'd be happy to come on again, wouldn't you?
Yeah, if anyone wants to listen.
That's an because I'd like to get into more detail about your experiences. Having been a referee, having been a judge, having also been a fighter at a really high level. Also, how you train students. The way you train them. Because I think people will be interested in hearing that approach from a 50-year-old managing director of an engineering company who used to work the doors and did karate when he was a kid. So you're happy to come back on this one, Justin?
Yeah, if people are willing to listen to me ramble on.
They'll listen. Yeah, they'll listen. Trust me. And we might dig a little bit more into some of the door work you did, because you said some interesting things about awareness and these concepts. Because I know you're also a meditator as well. So that's an area, we'll talk about it as well. I'd love to talk to you about, because we haven't really had a chat about this sort of stuff, because I sort of know you. These are questions I wouldn't normally ask you, but obviously other people want to hear them. And I do now anyway. So if you're intrigued, everybody, we're going to have Justin back on again. And so it'll be part 2 of Justin Reeks. We've talked about his lower part. We're going to look at his upper part in the next one. So Justin, I just want to say thanks for coming on, mate.
No worries.
It's been great having you on. And I'll see you in part 2.
So I learned from the best.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Thanks for watching. This has been Higher Way Podcast, and I'm signing out.